You still resonate with Jesus, but not the church, at least not the way you used to. You're reading stuff about other religions, but you're not sure if that's allowed. You started to adopt practices and ideas from other religious traditions and integrated them into your personal spirituality, and now maybe you're wondering if you've gone just too far. And to top it all off, after you've had this exposure to another religion or two, you're feeling your connection to that traditional Christianity that you grew up with start to weaken. And if someone were to ask you right now, what do you believe? That might actually be kind of hard to answer. Now, if any of this sounds familiar to you, I want you to hear this. It doesn't mean that you're lost. It means that your spirituality is evolving. And believe it or not, it's actually following a certain pattern. A lot of people assume that when faith starts to shift like this, it means that they've lost all sense of spiritual direction. But I don't think that's the best way to understand it. You see, I think what's happening to many people, especially the church alumni, is that they're becoming what we might call religiously fluid. Now, religious fluidity is what happens when your spirituality is no longer confined to one single fixed system. And you begin to move across religious boundaries in a way that felt previously forbidden. And here's the most important part about this. This interest in other religions, this desire to learn more about other religions, and this willingness to incorporate insights and practices from other religions is really all a part of spiritual growth. And when you step into this direction, it might feel like you're stepping off of the path and into the indiscernible brush. But in actuality, what you're really doing is stepping off of one path and onto another. And just like the way your previous path had its own map to guide you as you moved forward in your spiritual life, this new path, once it starts to come into focus, has its own map that you will become accustomed to over time. When on a spiritual journey, spiritual maps are important because without one, the experience can be downright disorienting. You can feel inconsistent. You can feel like you're doing something wrong. You can feel like you've completely and utterly lost your foundation in life. But once you recognize what is happening, something shifts. You realize, I'm not drifting, I am transitioning. And that matters because naming the new religious pattern that you're working with doesn't just give you clarity, it gives you stability. And in the case I'm talking about here, this new pattern or map is religious fluidity. So I want to walk you through 3 common ways that religious fluidity tends to take shape. And as I do, I'd like you to pay attention to the one that feels most like you. The first type of religious fluidity is what I would call augmentation. And this is when you're still rooted in Christianity, but you've started to expand beyond it. You might still identify as a Christian. You might still feel connected to Jesus, the Bible, and your Christian tradition. But you've begun to draw from other sources as well. Maybe it's the practice of mindfulness. Maybe tarot. Maybe it's incorporating some insights from Taoist philosophy. In each of these cases, what's happening here is not the abandonment of the original tradition. It's an expansion beyond it. Because somewhere along the way, something in your experience told you that what you inherited religiously was just too small to hold everything that was real for you. And it's not that what you inherited was wrong, it's just that it was incomplete. And so instead of leaving, you decided to stretch. And the strength of this approach is that it allows you to grow spiritually without losing that center. Through augmentation, you are building on what you already know. But this path of augmentation isn't without its risks. Because you see, you run the danger of staying on the surface level with this new religious information. And it's easy to fall into the trap of collecting ideas without actually pursuing them enough to find out what they really mean within the context of that tradition. And that can lead to working with caricatures that are actually disrespectful to their origins and ultimately don't facilitate spiritual transformation. So if this is you, the big question becomes, are you actually expanding into greater depth, or are you just treating other religions as insignificant stepping stones for your spiritual journey? And by the way, if this is the kind of topic that you like to hear about, I want you to know that you are in the right place because I make videos for progressive Christians, questioners, and the church alumni. You know, those people who live on the edge of faith, whether they have left the church behind or they're still sitting in the pews. But anyway, if this is you, make sure to like and subscribe so we can stay connected. The second type of religious fluidity is amalgamation. Now, this is different. Here, you're not keeping the Christianity you know at the center and building from it. Instead, you're actually building something new. You've started weaving together multiple sources into a more integrated spiritual framework. Maybe you still carry on that Christian language, but your actual spirituality will be a blend of traditions. It might include Buddhist practices. It might include psychological insight, mystical traditions, pagan ritual, or whatever else works for you. But at this point, this is what is very clear. You are no longer operating from some clear home base. Rather, you're constructing something that feels more honest to your unique lived experience. And sometimes these amalgamations can take less of a personal and more of an official shape. Consider Christo-paganism or Christian Wicca, or look up the Baha'i faith or Unitarian Universalism. For many people, this approach speaks best to and for them because what they now see as true cannot be contained by any single system. And somehow to focus on one single system would be to miss that bigger picture. I think the greatest strength of this approach is just downright honesty. You recognize that no one perspective can capture the magnificence of this universe, and you refuse to force it to fit somehow into a single framework. But this approach also carries its own risk, and that is shallowness. If there is no depth, no discipline, or no reflection, the path of spiritual amalgamation can simply become little more than a loose collection of ideas that we hold on to just because they make us feel good. And so, if this is you, then the big question is, are you integrating or are you just accumulating? The third type of religious fluidity is multiplicity. This is where things start to get even more complex, because instead of blending everything into one system, you actually inhabit more than one religious system while keeping them separate. Here you don't feel the need to collapse everything into a single identity. You might meaningfully engage as a full participant in the Christian religion, even being a member of a church, while at the same time participating as a Buddhist who is also part of a Buddhist community, or a pagan who's part of a pagan community. It's not that you're primarily one and secondarily the other. Quite the contrary, you are engaging both in significant and substantial ways. When on the path of multiplicity, you're not trying to resolve that tension. You're actually living inside of it. And that's important because you realize that connecting with the depth of a tradition takes time and practice and dedication. So the strength of the path of multiplicity is found through flexibility and depth as you learn how to move between perspectives and honor complexity. But the risk is fragmentation. Because you see, without a grounded center, it can become difficult to remain rooted in anything at all. So if this is you, the question becomes, are you holding on to complexity or losing coherence? Now, I want to be clear about something. These three paths are not boxes. They are not meant to contain your spiritual journey. This is not about solidifying a new religious identity by labeling yourself once and for all. In fact, it's quite possible that you'll start off on one path and then slide right into another, and that's perfectly okay. My hope is that you find in these three types of religious fluidity inspiration, that you recognize the pattern somehow in your own spiritual movement. Because once you can see the pattern, once you can see that roadmap, you can stop assuming that something has gone wrong with your spirituality. So if you want to ask yourself which one of these three types fits you best, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with trying to identify yourself spiritually as long as you're not pinning yourself down. But I actually think that there's a more important question for you to ask than that, and that is this. How is my spiritual path facilitating transformation? How is this transfiguring me? Is your path making you more capable of love, more honest, more grounded in reality, more open, but also more responsible? Or is it making you scattered, reactive, unanchored? This kind of questioning is important because religious fluidity on its own isn't the goal. It is simply a means to an end, which is spiritual maturation. If you are a spiritual person, you are perpetually going to be in some form of transition. And like any transition, it can lead to somewhere meaningful or somewhere shallow. And at the end of the day, what's most important is who you are becoming and what kind of effect you are having on this world. So if you've been feeling like your spirituality doesn't fit into one category anymore and you find yourself resonating a little bit more with other religious traditions, I want you to hear this. You are not lost. You are not doing it wrong, and you are not the only one going through this. You are simply stepping onto a slightly different spiritual path from where you started. And there's a pattern, a roadmap for that journey to help you along the way, and it's called religious fluidity. But right now, I'd love to hear from you. Which of these feels closest to where you are right now? Are you expanding through augmentation? Are you constructing through amalgamation? Are you living across multiple religious worldviews through multiplicity? Let us know in the comments, and if you've made it this far, like and subscribe so we can stay connected. I'm Bo McGuffey of the Evolving Christian Faith Network. Until next time, peace.